Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 25 of the Not AFib podcast, powered by the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. My name is Mark Flaughter. In the high-pressure world of emergency medical services, many clinicians hesitate to share their struggles, prioritizing their duties over personal well-being. As a result, mental health challenges are often overshadowed and left unaddressed, leading to potential long-term consequences. The EMS clinicians routinely face life-threatening, emotionally stressful situations. Over time, these cumulative stressors can lead to mental health issues like burnout, anxiety, depression, PTSD, or even suicide. To address these concerns, it is vital to adopt a proactive, scientifically validated, and anonymous approach to mental wellness. This approach helps identify early signs of mental distress while ensuring confidentiality. EMS personnel can access mental health resources, peer support, insurance benefits, and professional care, creating a safety net to prevent critical incidents and support their mental health needs. Historically, mental health in high-stress professions like EMS has been approached reactively, addressing crises only after they occur. This model perpetuates stigma and discourages early intervention. A proactive approach to mental wellness, however, aims to identify issues early through regular anonymous check-ins using validated tools like the self-management self-test. In addition, the relationship between past trauma and career choices in high-stress fields such as policing, firefighting, and emergency medical services can lead individuals to seek environments that reflect their internal states of chaos or other opportunities to regain control and purpose. By integrating SMST into EMS shifts via mobile apps or online platforms, mental health assessments become routine, normalizing the process of seeking help. These tools empower EMS clinicians to monitor their own mental wellness before problems escalate, encouraging timely intervention. This proactive approach also destigmatizes mental health concerns and allows individuals to take control of their well-being, contributing to a healthier, more resilient workforce. Teams trained in resilience create a culture of mutual support and early intervention, reducing the risk of burnout and mental health crises. The mental well-being of EMS clinicians is critical to public safety. A proactive, scientifically validated, and anonymous mental wellness program fosters a culture of psychological safety within EMS teams. By leveraging data to monitor mental health across the 5 domains, awareness of reality, maintaining relationships, orientation towards the future, making decisions, and taking action, organizations can intervene early, preventing crises before they occur. By connecting individuals to resources such as peer support, insurance benefits, and clinical care, EMS organizations can ensure that their workforce remains mentally resilient and capable of handling the immense pressures of the job. In doing so, they protect both their personnel and the public they serve. And those are excerpts from an article entitled The Importance of a Proactive Approach to Mental Well-Being in First Responders, published in January 2025 by GEMS and written by Kenny Schnell. Joining me today is Dr. Richard Janka. Dr. Richard Janka is the Chief Executive Officer, leading 9/11 Training Institute operations and partnerships with public safety agencies and corporate partners. He is also the faculty chair and consultant specializing in design and delivery of resilience, peer support, and emergency mental health dispatch training for 911 professionals and other emergency responders. Dr. Janka is a licensed clinical psychologist in Michigan and currently the clinical director at Solid Ground Counseling, offering individual, couple, family, and group counseling. The clinic also offers in-service trainings on a variety of mental health topics. Dr. Janka works with clients and supervises the clinical staff. He conducts all the first responder trainings, including wellness, peer support, and critical incident stress management. He also serves as a mental health consultant for 15 agencies, including their dispatchers in the greater Detroit metropolitan area, including the Michigan State Police. Dr. Janka completed a 2-year internship in rehabilitation psychology at Special Tree Rehabilitation Services, working with patients who suffered brain and spinal cord injuries. After graduation, he worked as a forensic psychologist at the Wayne County Jail, where he worked with inmates conducting suicide assessments, risk assessments, and testified as an expert witness. He also served as a reserve deputy with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office in Michigan. In 2012, Dr. Janka graduated with his doctoral degree. His dissertation investigated symptoms of PTSD among law enforcement officers who had responded to critical incidents involving death. It was presented at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation's World Congress in 2013. Dr. Janka was an adjunct faculty instructor at Oakland Community College and taught classes at Oakland Police Academy and the Detroit Police Department Chaplains Academy. Dr. Janka worked as a staff psychologist with the Michigan Department of State Police for 5 years. His responsibilities included psychotherapy for department members and their families, teaching at recruit school, training and coaching crisis negotiators, wellness training for emergency dispatchers, and serving as program coordinator for the department's peer support program. Dr. Janka holds a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, a Master of Arts in counseling psychology, and a Bachelor of Arts in sociology. He is a certified critical incident stress management instructor with the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, Incorporated. Dr. Janka, welcome to the show.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's get started with what attracted you to the EMS, law enforcement, the first responder field. Do you have a background in EMS at all?
I don't have a background in EMS. The first responders that I started working with back in the day were firefighters and medics. But it was my job at the Wayne County Jail that sparked my interest in, well, I wouldn't say sparked my interest, started a fire within me to work with first responders. I worked the mental health unit, and at that time, the mental health unit had, I think it was 100 beds, and it was full all the time. And a lot of those individuals were really, really sick. And I don't mean that word disparagingly. They had very significant mental health issues. And it occurred to me that for so many people in our community, their mental health care comes through the emergency services. And so I wasn't feeling called to work with those individuals. I mean, yes, I was working at the jail working with those individuals. But I realized that, for our first responders were essentially the gatekeepers for so many people's mental health. They wouldn't get treatment. They wouldn't get mental health care if it weren't through EMS, if it weren't through law enforcement. And then I realized that those individuals who are serving those folks don't often have the training to handle that. They don't have the training to work with people who are in a state of mental health crisis, and they don't have the training to handle the repercussions that they're going to experience from working in A, such a stressful environment, and B, consistently working with people in a mental health crisis. So that's really what sparked my interest. And then, then I got a job with the Michigan State Police, and then one thing kind of led to another, and here I am.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the 911 Training Institute. What prompted you to start up this endeavor, and what exactly does the 911 Training Institute provide?
So the 911 Training Institute, I'm actually not the founder of it.
Okay.
I'm the founder of Solid Ground Counseling, but when I left MSP, I went back to do private practice full time, got involved in trainings, and then I came aboard 911 Training Institute probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Worked with the original founder, Jim Marshall, who has since retired. It was a really good partnership with 911 TI because I was already doing a lot of the same things that he was doing, and historically, 911 TI focused solely on 911 dispatchers. And that was his experience, and and Jim was for the most part a one-man operation. And I came aboard, and I had experience working with other disciplines, so we started expanding it, and now 911 TI proudly serves all first responders.
Okay. We first met earlier this year when you spoke at the Pinnacle EMS Leadership Conference, and you spoke about resilience.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Obviously, resilience, mental health, well-being, everything kind of ties together. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of resilience and how that ties into the mental health and well-being of first responders?
So resilience is one of those buzzwords out there in the mental health world. And, if you were to, I don't know, talk to 100 people and say, hey, what image comes to your mind when you hear the word resilience? Most of them are going to say something like bouncing back or a ball that is squeezed returns to its form.
Hmm.
And that's a no okay starting point, but it's not good enough. And
Hmm.
so, the definition of resilience that we teach on is the ability to prepare for, recover from, and grow through stress and trauma. Prepare
Okay.
for, recover from, and grow through. Because we teach on the premise that what if there's something better than just bouncing back? Or
Okay.
what if you weren't a healthy individual to begin with, and you don't want to bounce back to that. You want to grow through it, and that's consistent with kind of how our bodies are designed, whether you believe it's God or evolution. Um, Back in 1995, when I was a stupid college kid, I was hit by a car and broke my leg. And when they originally said it not in the right way and casted me and sent me on my way. A couple weeks later, I'm just in excruciating pain, and you might be sitting there thinking, "Bro, you were hit
Hmm.
by a car." I'm like, "Yeah, I get it, but it should have gotten a little better." And what they we went for a second opinion, and they did an X-ray and determined they didn't set my leg the right way. So they said we could do one of two things. We could do nothing and give you some medication that will help with the pain, and the pain will eventually go away, but you'll always kind of be achy and always kind of have that nagging
Hmm.
injury. Or we could re-break the leg, set it appropriately, and you will fully heal from it. And that's what we did, and they weren't wrong. It hurt really bad. It was the
Hmm.
more painful option, but I can do all the things I want to do now. And now, not only is my leg healed, it's actually stronger than it was. There's a calcium deposit around that break. That part of the bone is actually stronger than it was before. And it wasn't until years later I reflected back on that and realized our bodies aren't designed to withstand all of the trauma that we're going to experience, but it is designed to heal from that trauma.
Hmm.
And if our bodies are designed like that, then our minds must also be designed for that as well. Our minds aren't designed to withstand all the terrible traumas that we're going to experience as humans and as first responders,
Hmm.
but it is designed to heal from that trauma. And this definition of resiliency opens that up as an opportunity
Hmm.
to not just bounce back or not just heal from a trauma, but to actually grow from a trauma.
Hmm. We talked when you spoke in July. You talked about wellness programs and resilience and different obstacles as EMS leadership, whether fire based, third service, private. What are some things that EMS leadership needs to be doing to help ensure that the well-being of their providers is paramount, is something that they make a priority when dealing when in a lealership position?
Probably the first thing I'd say is you have to be proactive.
Okay.
Wellness, by definition, is proactive.
Hmm.
A long time ago, I was asked to speak at a wellness day that a particular agency was having. They were having a wellness day and they were running all their employees through it. And I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to come and talk." And I said, "What do you want me to speak on?" They said, "Oh, we want you to talk about suicide and substance abuse and spousal abuse and
Hmm.
burnout." And I said, "You know what? Sure. I would be more than happy to talk about all of those things. But just so you know, that's not wellness. That's
Hmm.
disease management.
Right.
Wellness is preventing your team from getting there to begin with.
Hmm.
Somebody coming into the profession does not have the professional goal of waking up one day drunk, buck naked on Chief's front lawn.
Hmm.
But that happens. Trust me,
Okay.
that happens. So wellness is helping people prevent that stuff from happening.
Hmm.
When I teach on this, I share a quote that I heard a long time ago from a pastor friend of mine. People don't plan to blow up their lives. They just don't plan not to.
Hmm.
Wellness is helping them plan not to. So a good wellness program, of course, is going to have some of the reactive components to it. We're going to have the debriefings and diffusings and one-on-ones and
Right.
check-ins. Like we're going to have all of those things. They're important, but a good wellness program equips your team members with the stuff they need, the tools they need, so that that doesn't happen.
Okay. So, what are some of we talked in the article about peer support. There was also some information in your bio about peer support. That's kind of a buzzword, at least in the fire-based EMS. The IAFF has their own peer support team. What are some of the benefits, and how does peer support fit into the overall picture of a wellness program?
Peer support is helpful because it helps bridge the gap with department members and professional services. Peer support is, in the grand scheme of things, fairly new.
Hmm.
Really has picked up steam in the last 5, maybe 10 years.
Right.
And honestly, fire and EMS were the first of the first responders to pick it up,
Hmm.
and when you think about it, it makes sense because at least in the fire service, if they're working 24-hour shifts, then, they'll go back to the station and maybe they'll have a meal together or they'll restock the truck or something like that. So it was kind of already conducive to peer support. Now, law enforcement and dispatch, they've come along and picked up peer support as well. But it was you folks, so it was fire and EMS that
Hmm.
really jumped on the peer support bandwagon first. But what it does is it helps normalize struggles, helps normalize asking for help, which on one hand, it's kind of frustrating that we even really need to do that because we like to say things like, "Oh, first responders really struggle with asking for help," but they really don't. Because think about it, when you're on the job, you would never hesitate to ask for help. If you go to a scene and there are more victims than you can transport, you're going to call for another ambulance. If a
Hmm.
firefighter is in a structure fire and he or she needs backup, they're going to call for backup. It's not only encouraged, but required to ask
Hmm.
for help on the job. But yet, after the shift is over or after the call is over, they're not asking for help. So we're not asking them to do something they're not capable of. This is within the wheelhouse of all first responders to ask for help. We're just asking and encouraging them to apply the same principles to their personal lives and their emotional health, not
Hmm.
just their occupational health.
Right. What are some things that members need to be looking at other members to see maybe if they're having or in the on the way to having issues, or if they're currently having issues? So as we're around the firehouse
Hmm.
and we run a pretty significant call, whether it's a pediatric fatality, a domestic abuse situation, anything that would cause a significant reaction. What are some things that we need to be aware, especially as leadership? Obviously, we check in on our members, but you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit. They're hesitant to ask for help. So when you go to them and say, "Hey, are you doing okay? Is everything all right?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." What are some subtle signs that, especially us in leadership, need to be looking for in our members to say, "Hey, we might need to step in and take some action here to get some help for this individual"?
Mark, I'm glad you're asking about the subtle signs because most of the time we're only talking about the extreme situations,
Hmm.
like somebody's coming in smelling of alcohol or they're reporting suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. Um, the real work is going to be in that subtlety, but it's also a little bit harder because it requires it requires that you're paying attention to your team.
Hmm.
You know, if you're going to work with someone, if you're going to notice some of those subtle changes, it requires that you're present with your fellow employees. Otherwise, you don't even know if there's a change, you know.
Right.
But and there are some common ones are, significant withdrawal from employee interaction. So maybe it's an employee who is usually an outgoing person and all of a sudden they're not outgoing. Okay. Now that does require knowledge of their baseline because if you take an introvert's generally going to have less of that social interaction. But if they typically are engaged and all of a sudden they're not engaged, that's a significant issue. You're gonna hear some changes in their types, the type of communication that they have. Maybe it will kind of take a dark turn, and they're
Hmm.
talking about more violence or negative things. One one of so I teach on 10 pillars of professional wellness. And one of the pillars that I teach on is leaving work tools at work and not taking them home with you. And
Hmm.
we talk about that. Well, we do that already, right? So your physical tools you're not going to take home, right? You're not driving your ambulance home. A firefighter isn't going to go home and mow her grass in her turnout gear. Okay. A police
Right.
officer's not going to wear their duty belt around their neighborhood, right? So
Hmm.
we have these work tools that you would never do the job without, but you don't take them home. We also have emotional tools at work that are helpful that you don't take home with you. And one of those tools is cynicism. We like to rail against first responders about cynicism, but let's just be honest, Mark. Cynicism affords some level of protection for first responders. For firefighters, for those on the out physically on scene, cynicism affords you some physical protection. Back at the firehouse or for dispatchers, cynicism affords you some emotional protection. So it's one of
Hmm.
those tools that has uses at work, but it's not so useful at home.
Right. Yeah.
So like we hang our other tools up, we have to hang that tool up at work before we leave for the day.
Hmm.
Now, it's also one of those tools that can be overused, and so I am answering your question here. So
Hmm.
cynicism can become overused, and you noticed it when the BS sensors go off with people, right?
Okay.
They wake up
Hmm.
one day and like, oh man, look at this BS.
Hmm.
They get to work and they're getting ready to get out of their car and they're like, look at that BS. And they get to work and they turn the computer on and look at the emails. Look at all that BS, right?
Yeah.
So you see a lot more BS when they're overusing cynicism, and that's a good indication that they might need someone to check in on them.
Okay.
They might need some support in some way, right? Because
Okay.
they're using that tool.
Right. And those are things like, and you mentioned you have to be present. So when you're working as part of a crew, here at my district, our crews are together 48 hours. So that's something that the company officer who's always there, that's some of those subtleties are
Mhm.
something that they can pick up because like you mentioned, they're pretty much with them for that 48-hour period, a bulk of it. So
They're
it,
living
it would,
together.
yeah, yeah. So it would, I don't want to say it's incumbent, but that's somebody who might first recognize those subtle symptoms and be able to take those first steps toward addressing them.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yep, absolutely.
You mentioned dispatchers.
Mhm.
We talked about it a little bit in your bio as well. For those of us that work in the field, we don't always take into account the different stressors that the dispatchers face.
Mhm.
They're obviously a little bit different than maybe what we face here in the field. They don't get the visual impact that we get when we arrive on a scene of a multiple shooting or an assault. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the stressors that dispatchers face that those of us who work in the field may not even consider or may not even think about when we talk about dispatchers and we communicate with them?
Mark, I had the unfortunate but fortunate responsibility of assisting a comm center after a line of duty death.
Okay.
So these individuals had they lost one of their officers. And I walked in there, and as soon as I set foot on that floor, they said, "How's my officer doing?"
Mm-hmm.
My officer, not house officer or whatever, or how are they? No, my officer. So the first thing that field responders need to know is that dispatchers take responsibility for your safety. And when they're doing status checks and you might be getting annoyed that they're doing status checks, like they're legitimately concerned about your safety. It's not just that they're trying to check off a box or
Mm-hmm.
turn the tones off or whatever, right? And when something happens to their field responders, they feel it and they feel it deeply. So that needs to be remembered. A lot of,
Mm-hmm.
I was a field responder for a while, and so we forget that. We forget that they take ownership.
Right.
So that's one. The second one that I would also mention is that they don't have all of the information because they're not physically on scene. They don't see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The human brain does not like that. The human brain does not like lack of information, right? So
Okay.
when they're on the phone with someone, their brain is creating these images of what is happening, and they're not usually best case scenario images, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're not dealing with all of that stimuli. The brain is filling in the gaps, and that can be quite challenging for dispatchers. And the third, and probably one that I hear, not say complaints, but frustrations with the most is they don't ever get closure. They don't
Okay.
get closure on the calls. Maybe in a small community, an officer or a medic might stop into the comm center and fill them in on what happened. Maybe, certainly not in the larger comm centers. So
Right.
they work with individuals, they establish relationships, albeit brief, but relationships, and they help people through, it's cliche, but true, perhaps the most difficult, hardest, worst day of their life. And then when the field responders get there, then they're just done and they don't have closure to what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be challenging for a lot of dispatchers as well.
Yeah. So, how important, like for instance, the agency that dispatches our calls, they dispatch for a majority of the fire and EMS services in St. Louis County.
Hmm.
There are 43 different fire agencies in our county, and they dispatch for probably somewhere in the low to or mid 30s of them.
Hmm.
So, how important would closure be for an agency or a dispatcher that works for an agency that dispatches over such a large geographical area and so many different agencies?
I mean, closure. I mean, it's very important, but when you get to a center that's that large, serving that many different agencies,
Mhm.
I don't know that we really have a good fix for it.
Okay.
I mean, there are some supervisors, if it's a heavy duty call, will do a little research to get the information to provide to the dispatcher. Yes, they survived, or no, they didn't
Mm.
survive, or the CPR that you walked them through was successful. So I mean, it can be helpful, but it's very challenging with a center that large.
Yeah.
And then there are in the frequency of crisis calls is significantly higher too.
Right.
So it's a tough. It's important, but I don't know that anyone out there has really figured out a good answer to that.
Okay. So would it be in a leadership position, would making like an establishing a relationship with like an operations director and finding out maybe what information they would like to see um, in response to some of these high stress calls that you mentioned, would that be a good first step?
That would be a good first step. And if I were to, I guess if I were to pick out some of the calls or variables, I would say if a dispatcher is on the phone with a victim or a citizen for an extended period of time, that would be a good indication that they're probably going to need a little bit of closure because the longer
Okay.
the call, you know, the deeper the connection that they're going to establish.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Switching back to our wellness,
Hmm.
one of the things that you talked in your presentation was about obstacles to wellness programs.
Hmm.
Can you walk us through a little bit about what some of those obstacles are and overcoming those obstacles at an organizational level?
Yeah, so the first obstacle and probably the most obvious obstacle to wellness programs is obviously going to be budget.
Hmm.
You know, the money has to be there, otherwise you're just going to end up half-assing it and it's not going to work. And if you blow the opportunity the first time, the department members are going to see that, and then when you try to do it a second time, like they're still going to have that memory like, all right, hey, it doesn't work the first time, so why is it going to work this time? You know, so
Right.
a good wellness program requires planning, not just waking up one day and say, "Hey, that's good. We're going to do a wellness program and let's get it started," right? So you got to plan it out. You got to have the budget for it, allocate a certain amount of money. And then I would also say it's really important to have uh, a couple of individuals who can be champions for the wellness program, not one, right? If you have one person who's kind of the ringleader of the wellness team, what happens when that person gets promoted or moves to another position? Then the wellness team is going to struggle because of that. So
Hmm.
it needs to be more than one person. I like to suggest that you start like a wellness committee, 3 or 4 people who are dedicated to starting the program, and they can share the load, share the responsibility. And then if one person steps out, you know, there are others that can step up and then bring in another person.
Right.
So that's a good one. That's one obstacle that people face. Another obstacle is maybe when command isn't on board.
Okay.
So you have to have command. Command doesn't have to be actively involved. And as a matter of fact, most of the time, wellness programs are more successful when they're not being run by a director, deputy director, sheriff, or you know
Sure.
anything like that. But they need to be on board.
Okay.
And then the second thing is that you have to get that mid-level management team on board. Sometimes it's sergeant, sometimes it's supervisors, whatever that mid-level management is. If they're not on board, it's going to be very difficult to get a wellness team up and running because they're the ones that are communicating up and they're communicating down. And
Hmm.
they're the most likely individuals to refer someone to the wellness program. So
Right.
you have to get them on board with it, and the easiest way to get them on board with it is give them a voice, not necessarily a decision making voice, but give them a voice as to what the program could look like or should look like.
Hmm. Yeah, for us here at the fire service, that would be our company officer level because as we talked about earlier, they're with the members for 48 hours. So and
Mhm.
they like you said, they report down to the members, they report up to the administration and the staff. So that
Mhm.
would be uh, an excellent example of getting that middle management or mid supervisor level involved. Um, One thing that you mentioned that I put out on my social media. Talk to us a little bit about culture. I think you're at, and the quote may not be directly, but I remember, I think you said you are responsible for the culture in your firehouse or at your organization. Talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about the importance that culture plays when you're talking about mental health, well being, wellness, resilience.
So yeah, I kind of came up with that from there's a scene in Remember the Titans where
Hmm.
the two the lead offense and the lead defense guys were having a conversation, and one was accused of having a terrible attitude, and he said, "Yeah, leaders attitude reflects leadership."
Okay.
And it was a reminder that as leaders, we have to accept the fact that we are responsible for the culture of those we supervise, of those we lead. If you're a shift supervisor, you are responsible for the culture on your shift.
Hmm.
And I know it sounds like a real heavy responsibility, and I want leaders to feel the weight of that because it is that important. And yes, you're not responsible for other people's behavior, but you are responsible for addressing behavior, and you're
Hmm.
responsible for managing those sorts of things, you know. And if we are going to have wellness be successful in our departments, then we have to have a culture that is accepting and conducive, no, encouraging of wellness.
Hmm.
You know, and the analogy that I used, I think when I spoke at the conference was, you know, it's like setting up a vegan restaurant in Omaha. So, um, it's just it has to be ready to accept the wellness stuff. So,
Hmm.
I mean, there are little things like you know, maybe encouraging healthy eating habits and um, healthy interactions among peers and um, the social activities and stuff like that are,
Right.
you know, just having a culture in that respect that is encouraging of people making healthy choices so that they don't feel like outcasts. They don't feel like lone wolves when they decide to do
Hmm.
things.
Hmm. With the wellness, and we've talked a lot about what we can do in the organization, leadership, mid-level management, mid-level supervisors. What about when members are not at work, when they're off the clock? What are some things that and you know, we've all heard the different, oh, you need to get a hobby, but what are some other maybe other practices that people can employ to help build resilience, to incorporate into an overall wellness program, maybe a personal wellness plan, if you will,
Yeah.
that they can do when they're off work to help deal with some of these stressors and some of the situations that they encounter, both in the field and in the communication center.
Hmm. There are a lot of people that like to teach and preach about work-life balance.
Hmm.
I don't. I don't like. I don't like to teach about on work-life balance because I think it's a facade. I don't think it really exists. If you're working full time, then statistically speaking, from a numbers perspective at least, you're going to be spending more time at work with your peers than you are at home with your family. Just the
Hmm.
way it works out. So it can't really be in balance. And even then, balance requires very little fluctuation. Like what they're always kind of in balance, and that's not how life is. Sometimes you have to prioritize your job over family, and sometimes you have to prioritize your family over your job. If it's always one or the other is going to fail. If you always prioritize work over family, then you're not going to have a family for very long.
Hmm.
Always prioritize family over work, you're going to get fired
Hmm.
eventually, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not about work-life balance, it's about work-life flow or transition, right? Being able to flow from one to the other. Be fully present at work, but then also be able to be fully present at home. And one of the I've already mentioned it, but I'll mention it again. One of the ways in which to do that is leave your work tools at work, right? I
Hmm.
already mentioned one, cynicism, but there are other tools that we have at work that we often take home with us, but we shouldn't. You know, compartmentalization is one. You have to be able to compartmentalize to do the job. Be able to open one drawer and open the other drawer. And at work, your mental health can kind of operate like a set of drawers. But at home, that's not usually the case. It's more like a plate of spaghetti. Everything's touching each other, right? So
Hmm.
you can't always clearly open one drawer and close another one at
Right.
home. So you got to be able to leave that tool at work. Another one is depersonalization. You know, depersonalization it's something that those who are not first responders don't really understand, but we have to depersonalize sometimes to be able to get through the job, to not look at, to not notice the emotions and the that level of pain of your patients sometimes helps you stay in a state of mind where you can help them the best, because you don't want to have that emotional transfer, because now if you start feeling their emotional pain, then you're going to get caught up in the emotional moment and not be able to help them, right? So you have to
Right.
be able to to do that on the job, but at home, you'll come across as cold. You come across as uninvolved, and you don't want to do that. It will
Hmm.
get in the way of things. The other issue that is super helpful at work is the medic voice, or the firefighter voice.
Hmm.
And it's that stern, authoritarian, assertive voice. Like sometimes, yes, you should always be kind to people. There's no excuse for not being kind, right? But
Hmm.
sometimes in a crisis situation, like this, if this is like maybe an active shooter situation, like you're not gonna say your please and thank you when you're telling people what you need them to do. Now,
Right.
most of our calls are not to that level, but when something needs to be done, you're going to tell them it needs to be done, and be a little less concerned to whether or not they take offense to that. That does not translate to home life.
Hmm.
So that's a work tool, that medic voice. You got to hang that up at the station before you go home. And
Right.
and there are others, although I just gave a few examples. But for everyone out there listening, I would challenge you to think through what are the emotional tools that you utilize at work that are helpful, and then be brutally honest with yourself. Are those tools also helpful at home? Many times they're not going to be, and you need to
Hmm.
go through that process of figuratively hanging those tools up at your workstation before you leave to go home.
Right. When when the time comes, and one of the things that you mentioned or discussed was having that difficult conversation. Um, if you have a member that you need to approach, what are some of the things uh, when you need to sit down and have that conversation that need to be considered, keeping in mind the state of the individual to whom you're going to be speaking, as well as the overall situation? How do you go about having that difficult conversation?
So I, I actually have kind of a five-step process that I walk people through, and that changes a little bit based on, is this like a leadership kind of position? But there are a few uh, basic or general principles that I think apply in all situations. First is you have to evaluate and monitor yourself first and foremost.
Okay.
I call it the red zone. And if I am furious because somebody said something or hurt me or whatever reason, and my heart rate is, 170 or higher, and my blood pressure's up, I am not in a good place to have a conversation. So if you
Hmm.
are in the red zone, unless it's a life or death situation, do not have that tough conversation.
Okay.
Take your deep breaths, pull yourself aside, take your deep breaths. We teach a lot of heart math techniques, so you want to that kind of state of coherence where your heart is in line with your intention, right? So you're going through your deep breaths, getting yourself calm, right? Out of that fight or flight mode, your frontal lobe kicks in again. You can think logically and rationally. So I'd say first and foremost, you have to make sure that you're in a good place.
Hmm.
Second is don't relish these tough conversations. If you enjoy them, if you like having these tough conversations, then you need some sort of you need to check yourself, all right?
Yeah.
Because you need to honor the weight of these conversations, especially if you are a leader communicating with one of your team members. They're going to feel like their job, whether it is or isn't, they're going to feel like their job, one of the most important things in their life is being threatened. And you need to honor and respect that and
Hmm.
handle it with care. So you understand the weight of it, and then you as the communicator, you have to be able to adjust your communication to meet the needs of the moment and the needs of the individual.
Right.
It doesn't mean you need to be a different person, but
Hmm.
if you're a very straightforward, in your face kind of person, and you're working with someone who's a bit more on the mild or maybe the meek side, you have to understand that your approach is going to come across as very threatening. It's your responsibility to adjust to meet the
Hmm.
needs of the individual. And
Hmm.
then the last thing I would say is ultimately just be kind. Don't be a jerk.
Hmm. Right.
Just be
Yeah.
kind.
Yep.
Kindness.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
We read in some of these articles, books, when you're having these tough conversations, avoid certain words. Do you have any recommendations on word substitute words, things you talked about communication, knowing the style of your communication versus who's receiving the communication? any any tips on words to avoid, maybe different ways of phrasing things so they don't come across as so direct or threatening?
I like to use I statements.
Okay.
There are a couple different ways to use I statements, but I think in this context, a good example would be something like, um, uh, well, people will often say, "You make me angry," right?
Okay.
So a version of an I statement that can help with that is, "I'm frustrated because this happened," or "I am
Hmm.
angry because this happened." So it's the individual taking ownership of their emotions. Because when you say you make me angry, it's kind of like you're giving someone power to control your emotions.
Right.
So it's you taking ownership and presenting it in a way that is less threatening. If you were to come with me and say, "Rick, you make me pretty angry," right? All right, I'm already on the defensive. So
Okay.
that kind of helps with that. And then also using I statements can send the message of understanding and compassion. Like, I am concerned about your well-being.
Okay.
You know, somebody might come into your office, or you might pull someone in your office, and they're engaging in something that is like, it needs to change. And you could get
Hmm.
all gritty and get in their face and say, "This has to change. This is unacceptable," and blah, blah, blah. Maybe you can address their humanity and say, "I'm concerned about you. This is a major issue. We've addressed it a bunch of times. It hasn't changed. Now I'm concerned."
Okay. And those are tips that you can use not only if you have to address someone who may be exhibiting sign, but those you can address work related
Mhm.
issues as well using those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would just say, listen more than you speak.
Okay.
Just keep people talking. You can utilize active listening skills. If you Google it, you're gonna find probably 5 to 7 different active listening skills that
Hmm.
people are teaching on. That's a great way to keep people talking. Let them send the message that you're listening to them, and they're going to be more authentic and honest with you, and you'll have a much more productive conversation.
Hmm. As we get ready to wind down, we're coming up a little bit over 50 minutes, coming up on an hour. What are some thoughts that you would impart or leave with us when we're talking about I know we've talked a lot about resilience, talked a lot about wellness, but what are some just thoughts on general uh, mental well-being in all aspects of life? What are just some things that you want to leave with us as we get ready to wrap up?
I would say the the call to action would be, do something.
Okay.
I know it sounds super simplistic, right? But there are a lot of people out there teaching on wellness.
Hmm.
There are thousands of books on wellness,
Hmm.
probably hundreds of podcasts on wellness. You know, there is not a shortage of information.
Right.
And what I have seen a lot of people experience in the wellness world is information overload leading to inactivity. They just get inundated with all this stuff. And sometimes it's overwhelming.
Hmm.
A lot of times it's overwhelming, and sometimes it's contradictory. Some people are teaching one thing, some people are teaching something that's a little different. Um, and then people just get paralyzed and they end up doing nothing, right?
Hmm.
You gotta find at least one thing and get started with it. Just do one thing.
Hmm.
So if it's from this session or another episode, find one thing that you can start working on and then just start working on it. And
Hmm.
when you do, you have to be patient with yourself because you're probably teaching yourself something that you haven't done before. And most people don't just pick things up that quickly, and it takes
Right.
practice, it takes effort, and that is what so people like to say practice makes perfect. I like to say practice makes permanent.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
if you want something to become automatic and easy to do, it requires that you practice it. So
Okay.
that's one thing that I would say is to move this stuff um, from theory to practicality and
Okay.
to not get overwhelmed by just choosing one or two things, setting a plan, and getting started with it.
Okay. Whether it's from your personal experience or from what you've seen in practice, do you find that there is one particular method that individuals use that they see that seems to pop up more so than others? For instance, do you find that you have a lot of people that have success with meditation, or something that you hear more and more frequently that seems to have more benefit or is at least mentioned more as being practiced than other things?
Based on the research that I've read and my clinical experience and my personal experience, if I could if I could teach only two things on wellness, it would be sleep and breath work.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
All I would teach if that's all I could, right?
Okay.
Those two things are that important.
Okay.
We didn't talk anything at all about sleep, and that's like a whole nother podcast,
Oh my goodness. Yes.
especially
Yeah.
because it's very different in the first responding culture.
Hmm.
Um, but we have to get that deep REM sleep. But not to go off too far in the weeds there, I would say related to what we're talking about today, it's breath work. It's taking some deep breaths, being simple about it. You don't have to start with doing meditations. Meditations are effective and they're very effective for a lot of
Hmm.
people. And there's research behind it. Um, but one of the most effective parts of meditation is that intentional breathing.
Right.
And there are lots of different avenues that we could talk about, but simply starting by slow deep breaths, slow
Okay.
inhale, brief pause, slow exhale.
Okay. Uh, one of the things that we've done here at our district is we've done, like, they have the yoga for first responders, and
Mhm.
we talk about breath work and then talk about box breathing as well. So are you just basically slow deep breaths is a good start, and then you move up from there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so to kind of slow the autonomic nervous system down to get you out of that fight or flight mode, you want your breaths to be more slow.
Okay.
So slower deep breaths and then a slower exhale. Now you can do deep breaths to activate the ANS as
Hmm.
well. That's going to be more of the rapid breathing. That's does not have the calming effect. So don't try that
Okay.
and expect that you're going to calm down.
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
it's taught as box breathing, square breathing, tactical breathing,
Right.
a lot of different packages. That's a
Okay.
great place to start. And then, yeah, there are a lot of different types of breathing that I love to teach on, but I usually start pretty much everyone with just that basic foundation.
Mhm. Well, that's you have to build from somewhere, so
Yep.
that's a good place to start.
Yep.
Um, as we wrap up, any you talked about the 911 Institute. How can people find out more about the 911 Training Institute?
Well, you can certainly go to our website, 911training.net. We have a social media presence as well. And now would be a good time to jump on the 911 TI bandwagon because we have some really big announcements coming up over the next few months.
Okay.
Some pretty exciting changes and updates to our programming. And yeah, and then we have quite a few instructors that are out there teaching classes and speaking at conferences. And, if anyone, any of your listeners run into us out in the wild,
Okay.
we would love to have a conversation and shake some hands.
Okay. And as far as you personally, any social media you want to leave us with for Dr. J?
Uh, no, I mean, I pretty much do everything through 911.
Nope.
I
No
don't have
worries.
much of a personal social media presence.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
Fair enough. One final question, not related to wellness or resilience or anything like that. What's the last book that you read?
Ironically, the last book that I read was Breath by James Nestor.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Excellent.
however, the last nonfiction book that I read was Project Hail Mary, by the guy who wrote The Martian, which was also a very good book. So
Okay. Excellent.
coming out in
Excellent.
the movie next year. So
Oh, fantastic. We'll keep an eye out for it. Excellent.
yeah. Actually, I
Dr.
bought that book at Pinnacle and I read it. I was bored. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Dr. Janka, thank you so much for your time. I really
Welcome.
appreciate the information. Thank you for everything that you're doing for everyone in the first responder community. For us here at the podcast, we are on Instagram at not_a_fib_podcast. You can email us at not.a.fib.podcast@gmail.com. Want to thank Dr. Janka again for taking time to talk with us today. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you again next month.